can you just tell me your full name and what professional title you normally go by these days? How do you refer to yourself professionally?
Well, yes, it kind of varies how much I use the doctor bit, but yeah.
We spoke about that.
So,
yes.
are we?
Okay, so your name and what you use.
Yeah. So well, my full title and name is Dr. Rachel Freeth.
Yeah.
And I suppose it does vary a little bit of the context I'm in as to whether I use the doctor or not.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the doctor stands for being a medical doctor.
Yeah.
So so I trained originally as a medic.
So if you and I were just chatting now and I asked you why you're not a doctor anymore, what's the story like? Tell me a little bit about the journey from deciding I don't want to be a doctor anymore.
Well, I still do think for myself as a doctor, but I would say yes, I'm not a practicing clinician anymore. So yeah, I left the medical profession almost 4 years ago.
What was that like for you when you left?
Gosh, I mean it was a mixture of very strong relief, but actually a lot of grief. A lot of grief, and I'd say I still do feel very sad about it. I was a psychiatrist practicing for over 25 years, so but I just couldn't. I just felt I couldn't stay anymore. Not just because working as a psychiatrist in the NHS I was experiencing it damaging to my well-being. Not just because of that, but actually I also wanted to work in a much more relational way and much more listening to people, and I wanted to use my skills and my experience as a counsellor a lot more in what I went on to do, which was to set myself up to work independently as a counsellor. So
am I correct in thinking you're one of those rare gems that is both a psychiatrist and a counsellor as well?
Yeah, and yeah, it is quite rare. Yeah. For I think probably quite a lot of doctors have gone off and done counselling training, but whether a psychiatrist would go off and do a counselling training is quite rare. Having said that, there are a number of psychiatrists who within their psychiatry work then train as psychotherapists. So I think what is rare though is that my training as a counsellor was in a very different tradition to probably what most psychiatrists would train in as psychotherapists, which would be sort of psychodynamic, psychoanalytic or CBT, or perhaps more integrative approaches, whereas I actually trained specifically in the person-centred approach, which is a humanistic approach, and there certainly wouldn't have been that training within my psychiatry training, so I actually had to leave psychiatry. I left psychiatry for a year in order to go and do this training separately. So that's quite rare, I think. So I only knew of one other psychiatrist in the UK who also worked as a person-centred counsellor. So that's quite unusual, yeah.
If you could go back into the NHS and tell put your hand up.
Right, yeah, okay.
If you could go back and tell your fellow former psychiatrists what you'd learned, what's something you'd love to tell them that you learned that would really be helpful for them, do you think? Even just like one or two things from your person-centered training.
Oh, from my,
what would you like to tell your colleagues that you learned that you think might be helpful?
Yeah, gosh. I learned a lot about myself. I think, because a counselling training or psychotherapy training, I think a key part of that is coming to understand yourself and one's own attitudes, views, emotions, exploring one's own sort of history in the past and one's own struggles. So I think self-understanding, self-awareness, that's probably a big strength of any counselling training, and I think that is something that probably a lot of psychiatrists could also really benefit from, having an opportunity to do a lot of self-exploration and self-awareness and to think about, well, why do I want to work in a sort of in psychiatry or in mental health professions? What is it that I've got to offer people? How comfortable am I listening to people who are very disturbed? All those sorts of things. I think psychiatrists, if psychiatrists in training had more opportunities to really do that kind of work and self-reflection, and to get to understand their own I suppose their own needs as well, and their own needs for support, and I think that could be so valuable. So I guess that was something I developed a huge amount of self-understanding and self-awareness through my counselling training, and I brought that into my work, I think.
Do you think that the system is uncompassionate towards psychiatrists and towards mental health professionals?
Yeah, I think the straight answer to that, I think, is that I think for most mental health professionals at the moment, I think have an incredibly tough time. I think they're doing impossible jobs, really. I think they're probably experiencing a great deal of frustration and a great deal of feeling that perhaps they're not able to make the difference that they want to make in terms of helping people, because the system is so pressured. I was going to say can be quite punitive as well. There's so many with investigations and a lot of monitoring and surveillance and performance management. And I think a lot of professionals feel under so much pressure, and I think that is uncompassionate, because how can we flourish? How can we develop ourselves? How can we practice in a compassionate way if we're under the weight of pressure and under a lot of fear, actually? So yeah. So I would put that down to sort of the organisation, a lot to do with the organisation, say the NHS and the constraints and the expectations on the NHS to deliver something that's probably quite impossible, really.
So you've written a book. You've written 2 books, actually. Let's talk about the second one first. I think this is the second one. So psychiatry and mental health, and I picked this up here. We are at the Carina Institute in Devon, where psychodynamic psychotherapists are trained in psycho-spiritual approach, and I picked this up because I was like, wow, someone's done it. Someone has actually written a book to what I would say build a bridge, and it seems to me so obvious that there's a lot of criticism of goes each way sometimes. Who's not trauma informed, or who's not recognising the fact that people feel terribly unwell, and maybe kind of romanticising it as kind of not as serious as it is, which sometimes is the criticism of people who are coming from the more trauma informed perspective. You've created this amazing resource which we'd really like to get people to understand, so maybe I'll start by asking you, what was your little seed to write the book? What were you thinking? I'm going to write this incredibly big book. What was the first seed that you had to write it?
Oh gosh, I don't think I could sort of single out one seed. There are probably many seeds, to be honest. I suppose I felt I was well placed to write the book simply because I have the 2 backgrounds. I had a sort of dual allegiance, one to psychiatry and one to counselling. And I've been a counsellor actually for almost as long as I've been a psychiatrist. So it wasn't that I finished psychiatry and then went into counselling. Actually, I went into counselling separately fairly soon after starting in psychiatry, actually. So I think that dual allegiance I think over the years I realised that in a way I was sort of developing a way of being an interpreter between 2 very different worlds, and so I guess that's probably why I felt I was well placed to write it, because I understood, I think, both.
I'm just going to interrupt you there because I want to ask you something. So you can see that the 2 worlds don't understand each other, and you wanted to help them to figure out what each other. You're trying to be a translator.
Yes.
What's that like, and how did that kind of come about? Tell me a bit about what you discovered when you wrote the book.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the book is trying. I mean, I wrote it primarily for counsellors and psychotherapists, essentially as an educational book, really, essentially. Although not just. I mean, I think it's also to be supportive and to be reassuring to counsellors who may be working with people with quite severe and complex problems. So, although I suppose my target audience was counsellors and psychotherapists, in actual fact, I think there's an awful lot in the book which I think could be really useful to a lot of psychiatrists and those in training, particularly because it takes a much broader perspective than you would find in a typical psychiatric textbook. And I also think it would be particularly helpful for those psychiatrists who have psychotherapeutic leanings. as well. So I suppose the book tries to put things. I try to explain in a, I suppose, a fairly easy to read way. I suppose the terrain of psychiatry, so that counsellors and psychotherapists have a better grasp of the field. So they have more of an understanding of psychiatry. So things like, I don't know, psychiatric diagnosis, what does that mean? Psychiatric drugs, psychosis, so-called personality disorders. So it provides a lot of information for counsellors and psychotherapists that is probably not covered very much in their trainings, or at least not in any depth. But I think more than that, and I suppose this is the area that I think could also be of real help to psychiatrists, is I think it really unpicks a lot of the key so-say truths and actually draws attention to the fact that a lot of psychiatry rests on assumptions and values and theories. They're not objective. A lot of psychiatry is not objective scientific fact. So I really delve into, I suppose, the conceptual foundations of psychiatry to really help people to appreciate that we're in the realm of subjectivity, really.
And the mind. The
mind, yeah, that's right. And it's, we're not in the realm of hard facts, really. And therefore, there's a lot of debates and controversial areas.
I love the way you put that. I've never heard it said that way. We're in the realm of subjectivity. It's beautiful. It kind of gives people a break. Like, you can't have this figured out for sure.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be expected to either,
No.
which is something that you're talking about there,
Yeah.
which I really hear when you talk about how the system can be quite uncompassionate and even punitive in a very subjective place where there's a lot of room for, like, well, maybe there isn't even an ultimate truth. Maybe there's just degrees of getting closer to things that are helpful.
Yeah, approximations of the truth.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your favourite parts of the book. What are the parts that you think back on and think it might be most helpful?
Yeah. Gosh, that's I really like that question, James. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're my. Yes, well, there's two chapters that spring to mind, and they're probably the two chapters that are the least read, I would suspect. But I suppose I'm most proud of them, really, because they were, for me, really tested my own, tested my own thinking, my own assumptions, and in which I had to really work out what I believed as well, which incidentally is another thing that the book tries to do. It tries to help people to figure out for themselves what they think and what they believe. So to develop their own critical thinking, to sort of figure out where they stand on things. So the two chapters, before I digress, the two chapters, I think it would be the one that explores the concepts of health and illness, and terms such as disorder and disease. So I guess they're the most sort of conceptually woolly and slippery, and when we use terms like mental illness, what do we mean by that? Or mental disorder, what do we mean by that? When we talk about health, what do we mean by that? Or mental health, which of course is a phrase that we hear all the time now. But what do we mean by that? So that chapter really explores that territory, and it's not easy. I don't think it is, as I say, I think it is really complex, quite slippery, which is why it's not really covered in training, I don't think. So, which is why I thought it was important to have that chapter. So that's one. And then the other chapter I think that I'm most proud of is the one on, I think it's called Spiritual Dimensions of Mental Distress, or Spiritual and Religious Dimensions of Mental Distress. And I'm really proud of that one because I don't think that is covered very much either. I think it's a very neglected topic. Again, probably because we're in the realm of subjectivity and we're dealing with very slippery notions. I mean, what does spirituality mean? What do we mean by spirit? What do we mean by soul? You know, so it's but personally, I get very excited thinking about these things. So because
I'm trying to interrupt you there because I just don't want to miss this opportunity to talk about something, which is, do you? And you and I were chatting about it just before off camera, so let's get it in this recording now. Do you think that spirituality sometimes is thought of as an add-on, rather than for some people, maybe in an altered state or a psychosis, it's a deeply spiritual experience, and we also spoke about the fact that maybe having some more space in psychiatry to look at meaning rather than just symptoms could be helpful. So just tell me, do you think? The two questions were: is spirituality an add-on, and is the world of meaning lost sometimes?
Yeah, I agree with both those things. Yeah, I mean, I think spirituality probably. I mean, I think. I mean, there has been moves in recent years to sort of bring in more awareness of sort of spiritual dimensions into psychiatry, but I kind of. It feels sometimes as if it's because people ought to know about it. Whereas, yes, I mean, personally, speaking personally, I for me, spirituality is a fundamental part of human being, really. So that's I would see myself as body, mind, spirit, soul. So I'm not saying that everyone has to sort of subscribe to that belief, but I suppose I would like more people to really think about these things, and even if they don't subscribe to the idea of spirituality or having a soul, many people do, and certainly many people, as you were saying, many people who experiences of psychosis, actually a spiritual understanding of their experiences is so important and maybe even fundamental. So I think we do need to know about these things. We do need to understand how people give meaning to their experiences, and a lot of people do give meaning to their experiences through a spiritual understanding, which that chapter really I think highlights. So subjective meanings, which I think was your other question. Yeah, for me, I really wish psychiatry could be more in touch with or more friendly to the idea that we're in the realm of subjective meanings and being interested in subjective meanings. So what do people's disturbing experiences, distress, what does that mean to them? How do they interpret it, rather than psychiatrists being taught to come in with a sort of framework and impose that on people and tell them, well, you
think psychiatrists would like this? We were talking about this, and you think they'd love a bit more space and time, I guess, and time in a system and stretch.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk a bit about that? But I'm just wondering also, you said you were a psychiatrist for over 20 years.
25.
25, yeah. Can you remember a time when you did hear someone talk about meaning and then their diagnostic label made sense to you more? You obviously confidentiality, talking broad terms here, but I'm just wondering, what are the people that you met? What are the stories that stand out where you went, yeah, I get it with that one. I can see the kind of correlation between the diagnostic label and what was actually happening. I guess I'm asking, like, where did the worlds collide in your clinical world, as they have in the book here? Did they any examples you can think of? Maybe in the world of psychosis, I'm thinking. And they might think they're being targeted by the CIA, or they might think they're being, monitored. I guess a lot of that is kind of present. Do you remember thinking, I think I can understand why you would think that?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me as a psychiatrist, I don't think I would ever. I don't think I would ever interpret people's phenomena in a way that kind of steered me towards what is the diagnosis. So for me, that was never really. That didn't help me to understand somebody. It didn't explain anything. It was just a medical sounding label, really. But I do understand that for a lot of people, having a psychiatric diagnosis can be helpful. I don't know if this is really getting to the heart of your question, James, but I do. It often happened that when I mean, in my job as a psychiatrist, I was required to make diagnoses, and I often did it reluctantly, I must admit, because I could see sometimes quite often actually the harms of it, and then it just wasn't helpful. But there were times when I think some patients, when it's suggested to them that maybe this diagnosis fits their experience, that's kind of how I'd put it. I wouldn't say you have this diagnosis. I'd say, well, that diagnosis might fit what you're describing. But and what I'd often find is that for quite a lot of patients, it might be initial relief. Oh, now I know what it is. Now I have an explanation, even though it doesn't explain anything. But it's a subjective sense of relief. But then over a period of time, actually, people would realise, well, actually, that diagnosis actually hasn't helped at all, really. It's not really helped me to understand why I'm hearing voices or why I feel paranoid. So it's interesting. So what people really want is for somebody to listen, I think, and for psychiatrists to listen and to understand that person's context, understand their background, understand what gives them meaning in life, understand where their beliefs have come from, all those sorts of things. So I don't know if that's really got to your question. Yeah, there's something I mean, we're getting into for me, this is sort of the heart of the realm of objectivity, subjectivity, really. And I think the medical training teaches you to sort of want to be objective, to want to pin things down, to want to label things, to want to categorise things. And of course, diagnosis and assessing people and finding out what their symptoms are all does that, I think. It sort of shunts you into sort of categories and stuff. But I think, but that doesn't, or at least not deeply, it doesn't help to really understand the unique person and their experience. So that's, to really listen out for the unique characteristics, not trying to find the generalities and put them in a box, really.
You were just talking about the idea of subjectivity versus objectivity and generalizations. I don't know if you want to say. I'd be in danger of getting into philosophical territory that I might display my ignorance. Go ahead. We can edit it out if you don't like it.
I think what I was gonna sort of pick up on was also that to understand people's experiences and their unique experiences, you really have to understand the context in which they arise. And I think that's also what R.D. Laing was highlighting when he says, something like mental distress or mental disturbances, what did he say? It's a sane response to a mad world or something like that. So he was highlighting that actually experience arises in a context, and that a lot of mental disturbance is entirely understandable given the person's context. So, he said some great things, didn't he, R.D. Laing?
So just want to pick you up there, because I think like context, meaning making, not trying to be the authority, is the kind of foundation stone of open dialogue in the NHS. Now, we know that the British psychiatrist Russell Razak is leading the Odessa trial, I think it is. It's nearly finished. Many people don't know it's the biggest mental health trial in the entire world. And it's a way of working that would involve two practitioners working with the family to try and understand what's happening. So just tell me a little bit about, do you see, are you hopeful about what open dialogue might offer for psychiatrists, a bit more space to really look at meaning?
Yes, I think so. I think it's rooted in a much more sort of, as psychiatrists, we don't have to be the experts. We don't have to know everything. We don't. It's patients' own, people's own experiences, their own understandings. It's important. It's the working in the context, their family context. That's the important thing. Yeah, I think a lot of psychiatrists would, if they had the space, and they had the time, and they had the support, would find that really, really valuable, and probably would really enjoy working in that way.
psychiatrists need space to explore meaning. Tell me about a model that you know does that.
Yes. Yes. So the open dialogue program or the open dialogue approach, I think, is one such approach that can really would really enable psychiatrists and other mental health professionals to work with people in ways that explored meanings, that was about deep listening, that was about understanding the context in which people's distress arises, and which I think also is the thing that I really really appreciate about open dialogue is that it actually adopts a sort of more not knowing position. So it's not, we're the mental health experts, we know what this patient needs. It's not that. And I think a lot of psychiatrists feel under pressure to sort of take that position. But I think open dialogue is different. I think it's a much more, understanding is provisional. That it's a process. It's a process. And that's the thing, dialogue is a process. So that, I find that really exciting. So I'd love it if something like open dialogue was readily available, and it's not the sort of fundamental attitudes and values of open dialogue, because it's not like a different sort of set of theories or I think it rests on a different set of assumptions and values, and I think if psychiatry could embrace some of those, well, I might have stayed in it. Yeah.
Last question, which was, actually was on that. I'm going to ask you about your second book. So your last question, you wrote a first book, which I'm now talking about second. And you said this one is more personal.
Yeah.
So humanising psychiatry and mental and healthcare.
Yeah.
Why was it so personal?
Why was it so personal? I think there's a lot more of my voice in there. I mean, there's a lot more of kind of saying what I think and what I believe. Whereas the other book, the big textbook, in a way, I was trying to keep, to a large extent, my own views and opinions kind of backseat, really, because I wanted to help people think things for themselves. I mean, I did occasionally sort of slip in my own view and owned it as such. But I think the first book, though, was I think it was a really I'm going to stop you there. Can you say the first book and name the first book? Is that okay? Yeah.
So just say it again. So yeah.
Okay.
Tell me what you think the first book was. Yeah, the first book.
So the first book, so with the title Humanising Psychiatry and Mental Health Care, but the subtitle's as important, The Challenge of the Person-Centred Approach. So really, that book was really bringing together, or really trying to explore how the person-centred approach, or Carl Rogers' philosophy and values.
And Carl Rogers, just very quickly, who was Carl Rogers?
Carl Rogers was the kind of originator of the person-centred approach. In the sort of mid-50s, American psychologist, mid-50s in the United States. So he was the key figure. He's the key figure of the person-centred approach. So I was really trying to explore and tease out how his approach, his values, which are all about relationship. It's all about relationship and providing the relational conditions for people to grow and develop and heal. And I was that book, Humanising Psychiatry, was really trying to argue the case for bringing the person-centred approach into psychiatry, but I think also understanding that there are formidable barriers and obstacles and tensions in doing so. So, which I experienced throughout my professional work as a psychiatrist. How could I be person-centred in my philosophy and approach whilst working as a psychiatrist, and the tensions were acute, which is probably another reason really why I couldn't stay. I in the end I had to leave. It was too personally. I felt my integrity was just too compromised, really. But anyway, that book was really arguing for how Carl Rogers' philosophy and listening and relationship, how, in my opinion, could humanise psychiatry. So, I mean, I don't think many psychiatrists would have read it, but I mean, it would be. I'd be so happy if it were more known in the psychiatry world. But But I'm not sure how. I'm not sure really how friendly psychiatry would be
Maybe
to it.
videos like this, people seeing you talk about. I guess maybe one last final question before we finish is, if if there's a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist or counsellor watching, what would you say is in these books that might help them? Both of them.
A psychiatrist and a
Or
a
either
counsellor.
way,
Yeah,
you kind
yeah.
of just like sum it
Okay.
up in just a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah.
Your elevator pitch for the books.
Right.
Instead of trying to get more people to read these incredible ideas, which need to be read, what would you kind of say is the kind of the meat of the books that could be helpful for people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the psychiatry and mental health textbook, I think for a psychiatrist, I think it would give more insight into the world of counselling and psychotherapy and what it's like working, what therapy involves and the value of it. And also that actually counselling and psychotherapy can very well be, it definitely has a place working with people with more severe and complex problems and experiences, which unfortunately I think a lot of psychiatrists think, counselling's not suitable. And I'm arguing that actually in a lot of cases it really is suitable. So that would be what I'd like a psychiatrist to take home if they were to read the book. And for counsellors, I think to have an understanding of psychiatry and to have an understanding of actually psychiatrists work under formidable constraints and pressures and stresses and within a system that is not easy to work in. And I think, so counsellors, I think equally, and psychotherapists, I think equally can be guilty of sort of stereotypical caricature judgments. And I suppose that's where the bridge building comes in, because I should like both professions to understand each other more so they can have more of a dialogue. So I guess that was one of the aims, yeah.
And that's why I invited you here today, in this bridge building organisation where, I think there's so much potential and it's exciting to have you here. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you for your interest, James.
It was a pleasure. And if you want to stop taking